Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Detroit Lions podcast, Jeff Risdon Solo Edition, bye week. Woo! Yeah. So, Chris is off busy working, doing his real job this week, and I'm enjoying the bye week, so I thought I'd shoot a little video to get us updated and caught up on where we are in Lions land after the Week 5 bye. Unfortunately, we just can't get a show together this week, so I'm going to do a little solo video here to sort of share my thoughts on a few things on what's going on with the Lions. So here we go. We're 1-4. We got the third best offense in the league. We got the worst defense in the league. Kind of a little bit different than what we expected. And look, the basic theme, I don't want to rehash Week 5, the loss of the Patriots. It was ugly. We all watched it. I hope you haven't rewatched it. I unfortunately had to. It's an unacceptable loss on a bunch of different levels. But I want to kind of go a little bit more macro here today. We are through 5 weeks of the season, and I think that's a good quarter point for the year. Look, the NFL screwed it up when they went to 17 games. I'm not doing one at 14 or 4 weeks and 1 quarter. So 5 weeks is a great time. It's a good time for the bye on that level, as well as also being a great time for the Lions to sit back, relax, catch their breath, get some people healthy, and get them back into the lineup. But, we're looking at a 1-4 football team. And I think a lot of us expected them to be 2-3, maybe 3-2. Probably not worse than 2-3 at this point, though. And I'm of that, too. And I've said this before. You've heard me say this. I expected to be 1-2, and I expected the first 3 games to go the way they did. Not necessarily like the offense is this fantastic and the defense is this bad, but I expected them to lose one of those games or 2 of those games, and I expected them to beat Washington. So I was fine there. The 48-45 loss to Seattle, didn't have that one. Had the Lions winning that one. The Patriots game was one of those toss-up games. I thought, okay, we got to try to win in this. Even though it's on the road, I think in general the Lions had the better roster, and I say had because I think injuries changed that, and it didn't necessarily surprise me or completely disappoint me that the Lions lost that game on the road to the Patriots. Even given that Bailey Zappi was starting, look. The Patriots have a high floor team. They don't necessarily have a high ceiling team, but they're a pretty high floor team with what they got. But the way that they blistered the Lions and the way that the defense gave up basically against Seattle and didn't force a punt, like the Seattle Seahawks have existed since 1976. They had never been through a game without punting before until Week 4. That's unacceptable, and I think it goes overall to a lack of having the team prepared, and that's on Aaron Glenn, that's on Dan Campbell, that's on the assistant coaches, around them, but it hasn't looked good, and it hasn't looked like a well-coached team the last 2 weeks, and that's very frustrating, and that is very dispiriting from all of us who we watched Hard Knocks. And we got excited about Dane Campbell and all the assistant coaches, Hank Fraley, Mark Brunell, Kelvin Shepard, Aubrey Pleasant, Antoine Randall L. We're all pumped up, oh yeah, man, this is great. We're not going to lose because we're not well coached. And the last 2 weeks they've been beaten because they're not well coached in those games. And that is a really frustrating place to be right now. So I get, the frustration. There's a lot of fans that are, chanting the SOL. I'm not going to do that, but I will say it is eerily mysterious how weird and how familiar this all feels. And, I do think that this is different. I do think, and I do have some faith, not total faith, but some faith, that Dan Campbell and this crew will get it turned around. But I also look at the personnel on the team, and that's been a constant source of frustration for me is that the injuries, the lack of top-end talent. And so somebody asked me the other day on Twitter, and I forget who it was, but it was a good question. It was posed, do you credit or do you blame more the coaching and Dan Campbell and the coaching staff for the 1-4 start, or Brad Holmes and the personnel department for the 1-4 start? That's a good question. And I tend to lean a little bit more towards personnel at this point. And that's not saying that I think that Brad Holmes is doing a bad job. I just think that where he's at with his roster building is further behind where I think it should be than where the coaching is with Dan Campbell and where I think they should be. And some of that is the fact, look, I grumbled about it on the podcast, on these very airways. Chris and I yelled at each other about it. That they did, bringing back the same basic defense and just adding in an off-injured guy in Deshaun Elliott, a 6th-round rookie linebacker in Malcolm Rodriguez, and basically adding Aiden Hutchins to that and expecting it to suddenly merge, whatever, into a much better defense, that's a fool's errand. And I think that we're seeing now that's kind of the case. Like, they didn't do enough to address the defensive talent to give Aaron Glenn and Dan Campbell and Kelvin Shepard enough to work with to truly improve what that side of the ball can do. Now, the offensive side, I think, has worked very well, and I think the coaching there with Ben Johnson, and I'll give Dan Campbell some credit there as well, in play design, schematics, playing to the strengths of Jared Goff and what he does well, playing to the strength of the team, which is the offensive line. Even though as injured as it's been, it's still playing really well, other than week 5. I think that's been a very positive thing. So I'm going to blame the personnel just a little bit more there. But look, there's plenty of fingers to point. And hopefully my overall overriding takeaway for what I hope happens during this bye week is that Dan Campbell points the finger at himself in the mirror and looks and says, what can I do better for this team? And Aaron Glenn does the same. And Ben Johnson does the same. And Frank Ragnow does the same. And Jared Goff does the same. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Michael Brockers, if he's even still alive, because he sure hasn't played that way. Aiden Hutchinson, step back. Look at your film. Look in the mirror. Point at yourself and like, what can I do better? And I think that's the easiest way for this team to improve from being 1-4 to being 3-6, which is probably the best possible outlook. Splitting the next 4 games, I think, it's not going to be easy, but it's somewhat doable. I think the offense is there. I think the offense is capable, and I think we've seen the Dallas Cowboys they're a big play team. They will give up big plays, and the Lions can match. They can go big play for big play with anybody, as long as they're not giving those big plays up to the Cowboys defense. That's kind of the key. Jared Goff had done pretty well at that early on. The last couple weeks he has not, and that's been a real problem. So as long as that's what I want to do. I want to get from 1-4 to 3-6. And I think at that point you reset. You're basically halfway through the season, and you've already won as many games as you did last year. And I know that that's below expectations for a lot of folks, but at the same time, you know what? Y'all gotta listen more when people like me and people like Chris and Chris didn't do it so much, but he was on board with it. You gotta get rid of the unrealistic expectations. It happens every summer. The same people who say, "Oh, this team is dog crap. They don't have enough talent. They can't compete at all." And then when people like me come out and say, "Okay, I think they're going to go 5-12 or 6-11," and those same people are like, "Screw you, dude! What the hell are you hating on, man? This is a playoff team." Like, reconcile that. Stop being that way, please. It's driving yourself crazy. Aside from making my hair go gray, I have the realistic expectations. And be consistent about it. Like, expect this team to be double what they were last year. They can still get to 6-11. I see an absolute path to that. I think getting healthy bodies back is going to help a lot. When the bye returns, let's spin it forward a little bit. You're going to see Josh Paschal on the defensive line. You're probably going to see John Kaminsky back. You're going to see Jerry Jacobs taking over for Amani Oruwariye and or Will Harris somewhere on the outside cornerback of the defense. I know my earlier inclinations were that Jerry was going to play inside, and he did mention that he had been working on learning the slot corner position. But, man, where this team's at on the outside cornerbacks, he's got to play outside. He's too good not to. Although I will say that Mike Hughes did play pretty well outside against New England. Not good enough that I would, have him supplant Jerry or anything, but it's something to think about. But yeah, you're going to get that back. You're going to have a healthier, hopefully, offensive line. I think you're going to see Jonah Jackson play better. He did not play all that well against New England. You're going to see DeAndre Swift hopefully back. Fingers crossed, hopefully. He should be back, if not in week 7, then certainly in week 8 and beyond that, hopefully until he gets injured again, which is just what happens with running backs in the NFL. That's not peculiar just to DeAndre Swift. Running backs get hurt. End of sentence. So enjoy it while you got it, while you can. And Jamal Williams is doing fine. Didn't have a great game the other day. I will say that it was the worst game of the season that I've seen from the offensive line, both collectively and individually, from Frank Ragnow and Penei Sewell and Taylor Decker. They all three had bad games at the same time. I don't expect that to happen again. I think that's a little bit fluky. So I think that the zero part of the 29-0, I don't see this team being shut out again. I don't see them scoring less than 3 times in a game again, whether that's 3 field goals or 2 touchdowns and a field goal or whatever combination of that. I think that's kind of the minimum threshold of what we're going to see from the rest of the season. They are too talented for that. One of the big questions that we get all the time, it's in the Slack, the Patreon Slack, which you should be in, by the way. It's the most intelligent Lions chat on the internet. Check it out. It's worth it. It's worth your money. We're having some very interesting bi-week conversations in that, by the way. Talking about Taco Bell and Daniel Snyder and wood splitting, all kinds of weird stuff. Whatever is on Wisco's mind, we go down that road. We indulge, and we appreciate that. It's fun. One of the big questions, though, is when's JMO coming back? I think Jameson Williams makes his debut on Thanksgiving against Buffalo and not before then. That's my guess. It's not something that I think is set in stone. It's a semi-educated guess based on conversations that I've had both in the past and recently with people who would be in position to know that. I think that's the most realistic target date. And Chris and I talked about it a little bit last week too. Don't expect him back for Dallas. I think they'll start the clock on him for Chicago and see where he's at with that. But like they did with Jerry Jacobs and Josh Paschal last week, they started the clock, and then that they're going to be active. And I do expect both of them to be active for Dallas, by the way. So Jameson Williams will come back from that. Hopefully the offensive line's getting healthier. One of the questions that gets asked a lot, Big V. I don't expect him back this year. Back surgery. I'm going to be consistent about that. If I don't think that Levi Onwuzurike is going to play, and I don't, I'm not going to have the expectation that Big V is going to come back from his own back injury. Now, it's different. All back injuries are different. Big V's is a recent injury. This is not a re-aggravation of an injury that dates back 3 years and 4 football seasons. So I'm more optimistic that we would see Big V than we see Levi, but I'm not going to plan on him coming back. My hope is, and this is one of the questions, and I will be actually over in Allen Park for a couple of days next week, just to get the lay of the land and the feel of it. I don't normally go over during the season very often. I am going to go back after the bye to sort of see what has changed, what the mindset is of the coaching staff. I also want to ask the question, why was Logan Stenberg put back in the lineup when Jonah Jackson came back in as the left guard? Why did you not try Dan Skipper over on the right side and see what happens with that? Or, look, I understand the Evan Brown wasn't an option there. Okay. Stenberg, man, it just isn't there. And I hate it for the dude because he showed out those last 2 weeks of preseason, and I'm like, hey, man, maybe the proverbial light switch is flipped on for him. It's worth a try. They tried it, didn't sustain. You move on from that. And I'm wondering why they went back to that when they had a Dan Skipper healthy and he came in and did play better than what Stenberg did. So That's one of the questions I'll ask on that. But I'm wondering a little bit, where the coaching staff makes the adjustments to get this team better. I'm wondering where they think they can do things with the personnel that they have that's better. And let's go personnel. Okay, because this has come up a lot. Came up, actually, it got sent to me. Doug Farrar of Touchdown Wire, my colleague and friend, wrote the Lions as one of the possible trade destinations for disgruntled, and that's being kind, Commanders cornerback William Jackson. I have not independently confirmed that the Lions have interest. I will say that they are aware that he's available. I do know that. And they played each other earlier this season. If you remember that game, you might remember that William Jackson, I honestly don't remember that he played. Did he play? That's the sort of impact that he had. He has been a colossal disappointment. He is a Amani Oruwariye style of corner. Now, I think he's certainly faster than Amani. He's got better hands, and not hands like catching the ball, but hands in coverage, understanding how to subtly get away with the illegal contact that Amani gets guilty of all the time, and the little holds, and attacking the hands of the receiver and things like that. Jackson was certainly better than Amani at that when he was in Cincinnati. Now, he is not playing well in Washington, and he wasn't always great in Cincinnati either. If they want Amani Oruwariye as a reclamation project at the end of a contract for William Jackson, and we eat a little bit of his contract before you see what happens with him, sure, I'd do that. I'm not giving up a draft pick. Not giving up a draft pick higher than a 6th round, I should say. Now, if you want to take Michael Brockers too, sure. Take all the salary you want. If they want players with salary, you can have it. Guys who aren't going to be around the long term. Will Harris, you want him? Sure. You can have Will Harris. You want Mike Hughes? Sure. Not all those guys, obviously, but I would approach that. As I said in the Slack, I do not expect the Lions to be buyers whatsoever. And the instant inclination for that is, so they're going to be sellers. Yeah, well, what can you sell off of a 1-4 team that's as talent poor overall and relative to the rest of the league as what the Lions are? If you're an opposing team, let's say you're the New York Giants, who are a surprising 4-1 and have a chance to really do some things in a weird division where Dallas is also 4-1, Philadelphia is 5-0. Those two teams play this weekend. New York's got a chance to capitalize and really hey, we can do something here, but they need help. They need talent. Okay. Let's say you're the Giants and you want Amani Oruwariye. What are you going to give for him? You're not giving up anything of substance for a guy that's going to be at the end of his contract, at the end of the season, who's playing dog crap poor. He is the worst corner in the league. PFF has graded it that way, and that passes the eye test, the sniff test, whatever you want to say about it. He's been awful. If you're the fan of that team, do you want your team to give up an asset for that? No. That's where I think a lot of Lions fans get kerfuffled, lost in the sauce maybe. It's like, there's the expectation. This guy's terrible. Michael Brockers, he's awful. We got to get rid of him. Let's trade him away. Somebody will give us a second. Stop right there. Nobody's given up anything of consequence for Michael Brockers or Amani Oruwariye or Will Harris or Craig Reynolds, who I like and who I think is playing pretty well, but he's a running back. There's zero market for running backs, period. There just isn't one. You can find the next Netflix somewhere else without giving up assets to do it. There are 3 guys on practice squads around the league. We did a little exercise with the Wires Collective. There are 3 running backs on practice squads right now who can start in the NFL. I have no doubt about it. So there's no market for trading a running back. So all of you who are like, you can trade DeAndre Swift, maybe. No. Who's trading for an injured running back who's looking for a new think before you act. Think before you say. Because put the hat of the other team on. Let's say you're a Seattle Seahawks fan. Rashad Penny's hurt. Kenneth Walker's been dinged up a little bit. They probably do need a running back if they want to stay in the thick of the NFC West, which they're not. They're in. Thank you, Geno Smith. Let's say you want Craig Reynolds. Why would you give up anything for Craig Reynolds when you can sign Philip Lindsay off the Colts practice squad? When you can sign, you can get for the same price, relative asking price, you can get a better player in Dearness Johnson from Cleveland. You can get somebody. You can get J.D. McKissick out of Washington. They're certainly in sell mode. There's so many running backs out there. It's very difficult to sell that. Who else could the Lions possibly sell? Taylor Decker? Okay, great. That means one of your first-round picks, one of your 2 first-round picks, is going to an offensive tackle. That sets back your defense. You don't create a hole to try to fill a different hole. This team doesn't need more holes. They've got to keep the good players that they have. And so then you're looking at players, again, your Will Harris's of the world, your Alex Anzalone's of the world. If you think another team's going to give up something for Alex Anzalone, come on, be better than that. So at the trade deadline, don't expect anything from the Detroit Lions. And that's coming up as November 1st, so we got a couple weeks yet. You never know, but nobody's giving anything up for Nate Sudfeld as your backup quarterback. And the Lions aren't going to be chasing guys who are free agents at the end of the year. There's no point in bolstering your roster for 2022. Now, if you can get somebody who's going to be under contract for 2023, 2024, maybe the Panthers, with a new coach, have a fire sale. I don't really see that happening because, again, they are in the process now of trying to recruit a new coach. If you're a head coach candidate looking at the Carolina Panthers, isn't that a better team if Derek Brown is still on the team? If J.C. Horn is still on the team? If Brian Burns is there? If DJ Moore is there? If you're trying to get, I don't know, Bill Cowher out of the booth, or trying to get whoever coaching flavor of the month is, don't you want a better team to recruit them with? They're going to have the number 1, number 2, maybe number 3 pick in the draft. They're going to have that in each round. Now, they don't have a lot of draft picks, but they're going to get their pick of quarterback, probably. You get a chance to come into a team that has some skill position talent, has some young defensive building pillars that are growing well together. And if you can add a quarterback to that, maybe you can prove very quickly that Matt Rule was a horrible coach, which I think was true. So I don't see them having a sale. I just don't. And I bounced that off a friend of mine who knows the Panthers well, and he kind of said the same thing. He's like, they're more interested in getting their next coach and selling him on what they can be than they are in selling off assets to try to get things that they can build with later. Because, again, you're with the Lions right now. There's not enough impact talent on the team. Some of that's because Darius Slay's in Philadelphia. Quandre Diggs is in Seattle. Golden Tate went away. Marvin Jones went away. Golden Tate's not a good example because he's gone, but you kind of get the point. The players who would be appealing to a coach that's looking to win quickly, they ain't here. Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell have had to bring all those people in on their own. And that's one of the reasons why this team was so poor last year. That's one of the reasons why they're still floundering this year. Are they better this year? Absolutely they're better. Just look at their offense. And I do think the defense is going to get better. I was pleasantly encouraged by what I saw from the Lions defense in terms of schematics against New England. Now, the execution wasn't great. That's in part because, again, they don't have enough good players on the team. It's plain fact right now. Again, it's better than last year, but it's still not to the level where you can expect this team to go out and consistently win. That's why they need another good offseason. This is where I'm looking, honestly, I think this is a huge offseason for Brad Holmes. A lot of people are looking at Dan Campbell being under the gun and look, neither one of them's in an iota of job security issue this year. But if they don't do well next year, that's when things start to happen. And you can see, Levi, second-round pick, I don't know if he's ever going to play again. Your prime free agents that you brought in were Michael Brockers, who was okay last year and looks completely done this year. You lucked into John Kaminsky. You brought back, Alex Anzalone as your featured linebacker. Chris Board is a nice little backup piece and special teams player, but if he's your number 3, you're not good enough there. You can't keep missing or not being more aggressive in getting better players on the defensive side of the ball specifically. And I want to see Brad Holmes do that via the draft and via free agency this offseason. They're going to have money to spend on it. If he's bringing back too many players that are the status quo or, players that he's kind of familiar with, let's say the Browns get rid of John Johnson, which they should do because he just doesn't fit there. He's a safety who Brad Holmes scouted him with the Rams. He was a Rams draft pick, played pretty well for Los Angeles, and has played well at times for Cleveland, but I kind of think that's going to go south there. If they bring him in as the only solution at safety, and you got Tracy Walker coming off an Achilles, and Kirby Joseph is probably the only other guy that you got, that's not good enough. You got to do more than that, and I hope that Brad Holmes has learned that lesson. So that's where, looking deeper on, we'll have a lot of discussions about the draft and free agency and needs like that, but I just wanted to give a little update on where we're at with that. So, folks, it's been 5 weeks. I hope you're enjoying the bye. Look, I enjoyed the bye. I took a little time. I went down to Cleveland. I saw my parents. Went golfing with my dad. I sank a 60-foot putt on the 18th hole to wrap up my clubs. I might never break them out again because I'm probably never going to top that. It was awesome. But one of the things, and this is one of the other topics that I had written down. I'm in Cleveland and I'm listening to the local sports radio. And I'm talking to a couple of guys who I know who cover the team. And I'm hearing the same thing. Our coach is clueless. He doesn't understand game management. He doesn't understand how to use the clock. Why are we not running the ball more with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt? Why is our defense so bad relative to the talent that we've got? We're underperforming. They don't look like they've ever played together before. They don't look like they practice. They don't tackle well. It's all the same things. Heard all those things in Cleveland. So then I talked to my friend, my best friend David, turned 50. Happy birthday, Dave. And he's a huge Bengals fan. And he whined about the exact same things with the Bengals. I don't know what's up with our coaching staff. Why can't we have an offensive line? Why do we try to insist on making our offensive linemen be better than they are when we're getting Joe Burrow killed? Why doesn't our defense work as well as it did last year? What's going on with, why are we missing on third down all the time? It's the same conversations. And it's a conversation that I had on Twitter with Brent Sobleski from Bleacher Report, who chimed in on it, when I said that I heard those things. And it's fascinating to me that Lions fans think that the Lions are the only team that has problems. And I cannot impart upon you enough that there are so many other fan bases who are going through the exact same things right now. And that might not give you solace, and you might not even believe me. Riz, you're crazy. Trust me, there's heat on Mike Tomlin right now. There's a lot of heat in Washington, not just on the owner, but on Ron Rivera. That team's 1-4. They went all in with Carson Wentz. How is that working? Who didn't know that wasn't going to work? Come on. There's a lot of those conversations happening around the league. Look at Denver. They trade for Russell Wilson. They're one of the worst offenses in the league. They also have offensive line and defensive pressure issues. The Lions are not the only bad team, and I don't think they're the worst team. I'll say this. The Chicago Bears right now are a 2-3 football team. I still think the Detroit Lions are a better overall football team than the Chicago Bears. The win total doesn't show it yet. I think the Lions are better than several teams. I think they're better than the Atlanta Falcons. I will say that the Falcons' offense has been a little bit better than I thought it would be, but I think they're going to plateau. There's the Texans. I think they hit very well. Their rookie class is phenomenal. They just need a lot more of it. Their first. Well, 3 of their first 4 picks. Getting Jalen Peter and Derek Stingley Jr. and then Dameon Pierce might be the best running back in the league right now, outside of Nick Chubb. That's phenomenal. The Lions are still better. They're still ahead in that rebuild process. So I encourage you not to be the all for not, or all is lost. No good comes out of it. There are some positives to take away from the first 5 weeks. Unfortunately, enough of them aren't in the win column yet, but they are things that will build to wins, and I know that's what we all want. We're tired of, oh man, we almost beat Minnesota. We led them by double figures in the second half. We almost had the win. No, that's not good enough anymore. It shouldn't be good enough. We shouldn't accept that anymore. But by the same token, you're not just going to start automatically winning games. Like, you do have to build up. You have to have some positive things that you can build off of. That's where this team is still at right now. They are still learning how to win. That comes from having record-setting performances by TJ Hawkinson. That comes from having Jared Goff improving his average air yards per target from 6.6 to 9.1, from dead last to 9th in the league. Like, these are tangible things that they're not showing up in the win column yet, but they are indeed building towards this team being better. And I don't want people to lose sight of that. So Chris and I have talked a lot about the moral victory, the concept of the moral victory versus progress. There are no moral victories, but you also don't get progress without coming with some things that would technically qualify as a moral victory. Like, good players playing good games, just because it didn't mean a win doesn't mean that it's not important. Like, that's how you get better. That's how they're going to win games. And you're going to have more good players after the bye coming back. Like we talked about, we're going to get to see Josh Paschal, see what he offers. Kaminsky coming back is going to be huge. Jerry coming back is huge. Getting Jeff Okudah a little bit more solid and healthy. Rodrigo being able to catch his breath a little bit after playing as much as he has as a rookie. I think you're going to see Kirby Joseph have the same sort of thing. Like, my kids know this because I yell it to them when they're playing sports and I see them getting a little antsy. Burp and settle. It's what you do when you're drinking a little bit too much beer and you burp and settle. Get back. That's what the rookies need to do. Hutch will be fine. If you're calling Aiden Hutchinson a bust, I will just say this. Did you call Penei Sewell a bust a year ago? How's that working out for you? Did you call Myles Garrett a bust? Because he was worse than Aiden Hutchinson through this point in their careers. How's that working out for you? Von Miller wasn't any better. How's that work? Like, you got to give them some time. You can't expect those instant results. I do think that they're going to get a lot better after the break. And I do think that Aaron Glenn's going to get better too. If he doesn't, he might not be back next year. And it's one of the cases where 2 months ago we're worried about, how do we replace him when he gets the head coaching job? And I'm like, can we replace him by Christmas with somebody who can take over the defense? Like, that's how fast things in the NFL change. They can change back the other way too. That's what I want you to take away into the bye. Enjoy the off weekend. Watch a little college football. Go out to the cider mill. Go to a corn maze. Have some fun. Have a bonfire with some friends. Go out and do something fun. Enjoy the weekend off. I know I'm going to try to do that. Chris and I will be back live next week. Scott Bischoff will have a video or two in the meantime. And check out some Lions Wire stuff. I got plenty of things coming along. I've taken a little bit light this week. We'll ramp up over the weekend. I'm going to have a little bit of a draft-centric piece, and then we'll get it back into reviewing what we've seen through the first quarter of the season or 5 games of the season. With that, this is Jeff Risdon from the Detroit Lions Podcast and Lions Wire signing out. Be careful, be safe, be nice.